Morales in particular is very close with Fidel Castro and with the president of Venezuela, Hugo Chavez. And so, there are a lot of Venezuelans and Cubans here doing mainly humanitarian work. There are about 2,000 Cuban doctors here providing medical services, primarily in rural areas. And so there are certainly strong links. So, and I think that this has raised, what this incident with Alex and Schaick and the Peace Corps volunteers shows is that this has raised some serious flags for the U.S. government. Hugo Chavez is extremely vocally critical against the Bush administration, as is Evo Morales, as is Fidel Castro, and I think there's something about this trio that is really concerning the U.S. government, and they are trying to take some action to figure out, what exactly is going on between these three people. Do they represent a threat to the United States? And in the course of trying to deduce what this relationship is and what threats theoretically it could possibly have to the United States, they made some mistakes along the way, and one of those is asking U.S. citizens, students, volunteers, scholars to work in intelligence capacity for the U.S. government. And that is a serious mistake, as the U.S. Embassy and State Department admits. They say theoretically that this was a breach of U.S. policy, that it is not U.S. policy to ask these citizens to work in an intelligence capacity. But, if it was such a big error, and they reprimanded Vincent Cooper, as they said they did after the July incident with the Peace Corps, why do they still have him giving security briefings to Fulbright students 4 months later?
How did you learn what he had said to the Peace Corps volunteers?
Well, I had heard, after Alex came to me, both of us started hearing some rumors that perhaps this has happened to Peace Corps volunteers as well, and a friend of mine and I here started sort of putting out feelers, talking to Peace Corps volunteers, talking to ex-Peace Corps volunteers to see whether this had come up. We were doing it very sort of quietly. We didn't want to raise any flags ourselves because this investigation, the entire time it was going on, we were trying to keep it as confidential as possible. And we eventually found a few volunteers who were part of this trainee session last July who said, yeah, this embassy official came to see us, and during the middle of his security talk, he said that we should, report information on our interactions with Cubans, their names, where they live, almost verbatim as to what happened to Alex. And then we ended up confirming this account with the Deputy Director of the Peace Corps here in Bolivia. Her name is Doreen Salazar, who said, yes, this happened. We were so appalled by it that we not only instructed our Peace Corps volunteers not to follow the embassy instructions, but we complained to the embassy and to the State Department and say, hey, this is not okay. You can't come here and ask our volunteers to work in an intelligence capacity for the U.S. government. That is not part of their role here in Bolivia. According to the State Department and now the U.S. Embassy, as soon as this was brought to their attention, they rectified the matter. They reprimanded Cooper. We haven't gotten any details as to really what that means or what they did. But again, either they didn't reprimand him seriously enough, either they didn't make this a big enough deal within the State Department and within the U.S. Embassy here in La Paz, or you have, one bad apple, quote unquote, and if that's true, if he is someone who flies off the cuff and steps over the line, why do you have him giving security briefings 3 or 4 months later?
Jean Friedman-Rudovsky, you write about how this is yet another incident, the Spy for U.S. story following months of charges by the Morales administration and denials by the United States about another relative of the senior U.S. military advisor at the embassy detained at the airport, bringing in how much ammunition?
I believe there was 500 bullets that he tried to bring into Bolivia.
For what purpose?
Well, we don't know. According to this person, it was for recreational use. It was going to be a present to a family member who likes to go hunting or something like that. It was never really cleared up. But you're absolutely right, Amy, in that this is, only the latest in a very long series of accusations, but I'd also say, real events like this, like what happened with the bullets, of the U.S. Embassy and the U.S. government having some very strange actions here in Bolivia. It is noted in their USAID funding that they give, I would say, a disproportionate amount of their funding to opposition groups, to opposition parties, and to their, allied civic associations. Recently, in the past couple of weeks, it's come to the fore that there are several special police force units that are being trained by the U.S. government, supposedly for anti-narcotics work and other work, but it's obviously that's somewhat irregular. And so you have a series of, as I said, allegations by the Bolivian government, but I would say that they are well-sustained allegations of the U.S. meddling in Bolivia's internal affairs. And this incident with Alex and with the Peace Corps volunteers is just another example. And the Bolivian government is now saying, well, as they've been saying for the past several months, that they're taking this very seriously. In the past few days, they have made it clear that they are going to invite U.S. Ambassador Philip Goldberg to have a meeting with President Evo Morales and other representatives of his government so that he can explain just exactly what was happening here with the Fulbright and Peace Corps incidents. I mean, they've admitted that this happened. So they now have to explain, first of all, why is Vincent Cooper still in this country? Why do they still have him working for the U.S. Embassy? And if this was an aberration, if this wasn't, U.S. policy, one of the things that that Vincent Cooper said to Alex and Schaick in his security briefing is that this was, quote, a scaled-down version of the normal security briefings that they give to embassy employees, which leads me to ask, okay, well, what's the normal version? If the scaled-down version is asking U.S. citizens to hand over information like names and addresses of Cubans and Venezuelans, what are they asking the rest of the U.S. Embassy officials here to do in Bolivia?
Jean Friedman-Rudovsky speaking to us from La Paz. The U.S. government has not denied that these requests were made to spy for the U.S. of both the Fulbright scholar and the Peace Corps volunteers. They have not denied that a relative of the senior U.S. military advisor at the embassy was detained at La Paz airport, bringing in 500 rounds of .45 caliber ammunition for an embassy official. But they do deny that the Bush administration has been using USAID funding and other financing to back Morales' opponents, which brings us to Benjamin Dongle, an independent journalist who's worked throughout Latin America for the past 7 years. He's just published a book with AK Press called The Price of Fire: Resource Wars and Social Movements in Bolivia. He's just come back from Bolivia and has written a piece in the Progressive magazine about U.S. efforts to undermine the Morales government. Benjamin Dongle, can you flesh out what Jean Friedman-Rudovsky is saying, where the money is coming from and where it's going to in Bolivia?
Yeah, the primary programs that the U.S. government is using to undermine Bolivia is happening through USAID, U.S. Agency for International Development. And in 2002, a declassified memo explained clearly that a USAID political party reform project aims at implementing an existing Bolivian law that would, over the long run, help build moderate pro-democracy political parties that can serve as a counterweight to the radical MAS or its successors. That's a declassified document that I'm quoting here, and the MAS is the Movement Towards Socialism, the political party of Evo Morales. So that shows that, at least for the last 5 or 6 years, the U.S. government has been interested in weakening the influence of the Evo Morales political party. And most recently, after Evo was elected in 2005, the U.S. government has been acting to empower right-wing groups across the country by funding them through USAID. And though Morales won in 2005 with 54% of the vote, 4 right-wing governor positions did go to the right wing, and that at that time, USAID redirected its funding, redirected its focus to embolden those governors that were the central part of the right-wing opposition movement. And in 2006 alone, they've given them approximately $4.5 million to help departmental governments operate more strategically and